I wanted to make a video a little different this time because so many videos going around of advice to young dudes, people giving advice. Everybody up in arms about male-female interactions and relationships, which in one sense they're complicated, but in another sense they're not. And they're always going to be kind of what they have been, even though we're in this weird period of things being inverted. I think eventually things are going to return to some degree of normalcy, normality through maybe the existing system collapsing, or maybe something else. Maybe we actually somehow dig ourselves out of the trench, out of the hole, out of the pit in Western civilization, return to something a little more normal. So I wanted to make a video for guys, for dudes, top 10 things, especially for young dudes. I mean, this could apply, I guess, to anybody. And it's going to be lessons I've learned, things I've seen over the years, mistakes I made, ways that I could have done things better. And I thought I might make a separate video called 10 things I would tell myself, when I was 20 or something like that. I wish I'd known these things when I was 20. One of those kinds of videos, because they resonate with people. And now that I've hit the 40 period, I think there's a lot that you learn and you change a lot from 20 to 40. So I want to talk about top 10 things and ideas for guys, especially young dudes. First one is that I would recommend not drinking or smoking. And I think a lot of Gen Z are already, for whatever reason, deciding not to drink. And there's actually a pro and a con to that. The con is that there are a good number of Gen Z people who don't want to take any risks at all. They have the weird sort of, I would say, version of neoteny or fear of doing anything or any kind of risk-taking behavior. And so if it's motivated by an irrational fear of everything, then I would say it's not sensible on that basis to never drink a beer or never go to a bar or never try a cigarette or something like that. But when we become addicted to those things, when they become habitual, then they begin to more and more take over. And one thing you'll learn is that the fun that you have with alcohol, for example, in your 20s is not the fun that you have in your 30s. By the time that you're in your 30s and you still drink, you're not having blasts at the bar, you're not talking to girls, you're not being social most of the time, right? You're probably married, you're probably tending to your kids, and if you're still drinking at that point, it's going to be a problem. In fact, multiple members of my family and people I've known, and when I think about deaths that have happened or early deaths, almost all the ones I can think of that I've seen and dealt with and know about in some way relate to diet and food. And that would include cigarettes and alcohol. Is it my imagination? I'm thinking of the Oasis song, Cigarettes and Alcohol. Yeah, and that's one of my least favorite songs. But the better, the earlier that you can avoid this becoming regular, the better you are. And it's also a huge money waster. I remember back in my 20s, an older guy, a man he was a boomer, senior age dude. And I remember him telling me that I should set away $50 a week. And I was like, well, I make like $250, $300 a week. And I just don't really have enough money to do that. And that was not true. I did. It's just that I didn't want to give up American Spirits, Pabst Blue Ribbon, tequila, whatever else I was drinking that week. And so I didn't want to give up my party money. So one day it hit me that I don't think I was actually like an alcoholic. I wasn't an alkie. But I think if I had continued drinking a lot, I probably could have been a damn successful alkie too. if I'd really put my mind to it. Seems to run in the family to be stellar, to be star drinkers. But again, that fun goes away. I remember the first couple times I drank, it was a blast. And I remember the first time I drank wine, I was like, oh, this is so amazing. And by the time that you're in your 30s, as I said, out of your 20s, I wasn't going to the bars anymore. We weren't going out dancing, drinking, having fun. I was drinking and going to college, grad class, etc., that's kind of getting, over the line. And I woke up one day at college, grad school, and I remember thinking, I'm done. I don't even want to drink anymore. And I felt like something happened. Like I had a change. Like my physiognomy, my everything kind of changed at that point. This was before I actually totally quit drinking. But that was a huge positive decision. And I think I probably would have like messed up my liver and everything too had I continued doing that. So that was one of the best things I did. I still smoked because I was so used to drinking. I felt like I needed, some kind of habitual thing to keep doing, and that maybe if I kept smoking, I wouldn't drink. And whether or not that was a wise decision, it did seem to work. I was able to continue to not drink for the most part. But I also wasted so much money. And, I didn't lose a job or anything like that. Or, I mean, it may have affected some of my relationships with girlfriends in my 20s to some degree. But I didn't lose any relationships over alcohol. But it was definitely becoming a potential thing. And so, thank God I was able to nip that in the bud at that time. And I would recommend, as I've said before, to drink as least as possible. Because you're going to go to functions, you're going to go to holidays. I mean, if you can do only on holidays, maybe that's good enough. And there's plenty of people who this could not be a problem for. They're able to totally handle it. That's fine. I just think that you're way better off if you don't. So that's one recommendation, an idea. And all the money that you would have spent on alcohol and cigarettes, put that into something else. Looking back, I think, why didn't I invest that? Now, I didn't know about Bitcoin at the time, but I could have put it into gold. I could have put it into stocks. All the money that I spent on all of that, I could have put it into creating a business. And I was too enamored with going out and having fun and living for the minute than I was thinking in terms of delayed gratification and future value. And as you get older, you will more and more come to appreciate delayed gratification and future value. Classic primitive caveman societies. I don't believe in cavemen, but you know what I'm saying? Like savage-ish societies that are tribal and kind of living off of the land and in some sort of environment where the next neighboring tribe might come attack you. That kind of a lifestyle necessitated preparing for the future. You would have to, prep your crops and be ready for the future seasons. And so it was kind of necessary to have some form of delayed gratification. And even up until the promotion of credit cards and living in debt, all the sort of Keynesian economic stuff that we get pushed on us, the debt-based system, even before that, people understood savings account. When I was a little kid, I remember I had found $100 bill in a parking lot. I thought it was like the lottery for me. A parking lot of Ralph's in San Diego, and my mom made me go back into the grocery store to offer to give it back because it might be somebody's that they needed. So I didn't want to do that, but I think it was a good lesson that my mom taught me at that time about, choosing virtue over vice. And I remember the Safeway or Ralph's guy was like, oh yeah, you can keep it. We don't have nobody's been saying anything about a lost $100 bill. So what did I do? I bought hamsters. So I bought two hamsters, 0 and 1010, one of which my buddy, a black dude that I was friends with, he accidentally strangled it because he picked it up like this. And I went and punched him because I thought that that was my duty. So I don't know what like it was. As a kid, I thought that nothing, it wasn't racial. I would have punched any white, Hispanic, Cholo, Asian, intergalactic friend had they also choked my hamster. Choking the hamster, that sounds like some kind of weird sex thing. But anyway, no. The other half of the money, there's a point to this story about hamsters. The point is that you need to dump all of your Bitcoin and gold and invest in hamsters. If you spend the rest of your life stacking hamsters, you're going to be fine. Because there is a future hamster-based currency coming. I've already seen the executive orders. Trump signed it. And it will be connected to the Furby-based cryptocurrencies. Anyway, back to the story. So the other half of the $100 that I didn't spend on hamsters, I had to put into a savings account. My mom said, you need to learn this lesson of a savings account. And I didn't understand what the point of that was, but it was going to grow interest. And so that was in the 80s, and it was normal in the 80s to have a savings account that accrued interest over time at a bank. I don't even know if this exists anymore, but people don't do this because the entire idea of saving has been wiped out, not just because the savings accounts don't offer good enough returns, which I don't even think it's like 0.5% or nothing percent, but also because the entire society has been converted away from saving and living in debt, credit, and living on borrowed time and money. And as scripture says, the servant is slave to the lender. So there are times and places for debt, by the way. I'll talk about that in a little while, but that's not what I'm talking about. No, I'm just talking about the principle of delayed gratification. And so as a child, I didn't understand this lesson, but that's what my mom was trying to teach me with this. I wanted to spend $100 on hamsters. I wanted like the whole PetSmart full of hamsters, but I only got 2. And for some reason, we put one of them in a freezer after he died. I don't know why we did that one. It seemed like we would bury him. Maybe maybe my thought process was if you put them in the freezer, they come back when they thaw out. It's like, which is not true. They don't actually. If you choke a hamster and it dies, and you put it in the freezer, it actually does not come back. So anyway, delayed gratification and future value was what I was supposed to learn from that. And I think 10 years later, I checked on that bank account when I was, I don't know, in middle school after being a child. And I think I had made $5. So I went from 50 to 55. But even though those are terrible returns, the basic principle is still there. Hey, wait a minute, how come we don't save anything? And of course, that will relate to principles around Bitcoin, but today's video is not really about Bitcoin. I'll mention it in the money section, but self-control, gratification, it's not delaying the gratification, all that. That was a key principle that was being taught in this goofy lesson of the hamsters. But I would just tell you guys that this isn't really taught anymore. And when I talk about money, I'll talk about like middle class families and dads, and they don't typically teach investing. So they don't really think about it that way. They're so sort of wrapped up in the 9 to 5 and working 40 plus hours a week, which is fine. I'm not dissing the person that chooses to do that or lives that way. And society can't function without, an army of those people. But a lot of people, I think, especially guys, they have a drive to want to succeed. They want to, do better. They want to, there's a healthy competitiveness that dudes have. And so we want to be successful. And so I'm telling you right now, the easiest way, number one thing to do is to stop drinking and stop smoking cigarettes and other whatever forms of dip or whatever. For the 20 dudes from Tennessee that watch the podcast in the middle of nowhere. Number 2 is your friends circle. I don't know exactly what high school's like nowadays. A lot of the younger commenters and people who watch talk about it being pretty wildly different, although I'd imagine there's still some things that are similar, cliques and groups and whatever, although maybe in the 90s it was jocks and nerds, and maybe now it's furries. I don't know. People tell me that it's like totally different cliques, but I still think there's going to be some things that are still biologically the same, especially the way guys and girls act. And so, in that regard, when it comes to your circle of dudes, your bros, your guy friends, I was fortunate enough to have at least 3 or 4 of my good buddies from high school still my friends to this day, and we keep in regular contact. Unfortunately, 2 of those have passed away, one of which was pretty recent, and that kind of got me, thinking a little more introspectively and a little more nostalgic for, what it was like in the 90s and the good things that we don't have anymore from the 90s. And what I've learned from the 90s till now, living, I would say, a fairly interesting life. I think we've seen and done a lot of things that maybe a lot of people won't see and haven't experienced. So I have a unique perspective is what I'm trying to say with that. And when it comes to friends, I've also been able to be exposed to a much wider scope of people than just my hometown circle. And again, it's a great blessing to know a lot of people, far away and be close to those people, but also to know a lot of people and still be close to people from my youth. And, Aristotle said something to the effect on friendship that, you're only going to have a few probably really close friends throughout your lives. And you're only going to have a few best friends, maybe 1, maybe 2, max, right? Maybe 3 if you're dealing with a lot of people in a specific niche that you're really into or something like that. But also, one thing you should realize, and if you're young, you may not realize this yet, is that you're going to have seasonal friends, and that's not a bad thing. You're going to have people that for a year, 2, 3 years, you're super close to. And a lot of these people might be high school friends. You might be coworker buddies that you're super close to, and you think, oh man, we're always going to be BFF. That's my guy, man. We're always going to be chilling and laughing, joking. And then one day they go off into the military and you don't see them for 15 years, 20 years. And then when you see them, they're different. They don't have the vibrancy, the lust and love for life that they used to have. Just giving one example. Maybe they went through, traumatic military bad experiences, but that was a seasonal friend. And as you get older, you'll realize it's okay. Like I don't have to be BFF with everybody, and that's not realistic. It's not gonna happen. There's gonna be seasonal friends, and they're gonna come and go. And maybe you reconnect with them later on, and maybe you get to be friends again. That's also possible. But just remember that your high school circle of friends, a lot of your circles of friends when you're really young or when you're in your teens and 20s, they may not be your friends when you're 30, 40 or older. So you want to be careful about your circles because they're going to have a lot of influence on you, even if you don't see it immediately. And I say that because your circle of friends, although you've had good experiences with them, maybe you like them from, high school times and you get along, but they also might hold you back. There's a thing that will happen sometimes where people may not want you to succeed, even if they're in your friend's circle. They might try to undermine you. They might be envious of you if you're on the come up, so to speak. Now, if it's your BFF, that's probably not going to happen. They're going to want you to do well. But again, your friends circle, your social circles will change. Nowadays people move and change jobs way more common, more often than they did even in the 90s, even in the 2000s. So, and that's unfortunate because I don't think human beings were typically meant to constantly change locations and be nomads and change their friend circles or whatever. I think we're meant to be rooted and to have, lifelong friends. That would be a great blessing to have that. But a lot of people don't. And partly that's because we are so nomadic. And we've even covered writings from the global elite that talk about the intentional creation of this nomadic device culture where we can live anywhere and roam, and we're not rooted in anything. So it would be good for society to get back in the direction of being rooted and grounded in some location, rather than this thought that I can live anywhere in Airbnbs across the country or the world, and I can just live on the and work on the internet. That's not really healthy. It might be doable or useful in some cases, but to think that everybody's going to be doing this and should do this is just kind of absurd, given the fact that we are embodied beings. We don't live in an abstract ether. We live in the here and the now, in time and space, in some locale. And we should be grounded and rooted with some circle of family and friends if we can. So, choose your friends wisely and be willing to change your friends' circle if you realize, my friends are a bunch of damn dorks, dude. My friends are a bunch of beta soy men, etc. And if you're a young guy, if you're in your teens and 20s, especially if you're getting up into high school, college age, quit with comic books. Get rid of the comic books, get rid of the video games, get rid of all the stuff that should be for adolescence and youth that for some reason continues into adulthood. I don't know why, but that's probably social engineering design to keep you in an arrested development neotenous state. If you are obsessed with Marvel and comic books and all of this soy stuff, you're not going to be successful in starting a business. You're not going to be successful investing. You're not going to know how to go out and meet a girl and get a date. You're not going to be able to do any of that because your time and your energy and your effort is spent on something that is fantastical, something that's not real, and that's not benefiting you in any way. And in fact, ultimately, you're just consuming what the system wants you to consume, to be a consumer. Just waiting for the next copy, paste, ridiculous Marvel, whatever. And I see so many guys that are still just wrapped up in all this, and so many guys that live in the world of video games. Now, again, if you find these things interesting and you have this collection of comic books and you like, that's fine. It's living in these worlds and letting them kind of dominate you. Anytime I see, for example, YouTubers and YouTube guys, and I see toys in the background, I'm immediately disgusted. And I can assure you that any woman that sees toys in the background that isn't some insane Twitch streamer or something, like, they're disgusted too. No woman wants to see a guy, a grown man, with toys on his shelf and this obsession with something that's juvenile. It immediately signifies immaturity and an inability to cope with the real world, to be a success, etc. So, what you project in those kinds of settings and images and so forth says a lot about you. When I see, for example, guys or remember like a liberal Mormon, Dan McClellan or whatever his name is, and we were doing an analysis of the deconstruction videos, and all he had behind him and all the shirts that he ever wore were Marvel and DC and comic book stuff. That's an immediate get out of here. It just signifies not just low class, but something's off. Something has not progressed in this person's psyche and in their life to take them out of this period and this level of age 13, 14. Right? If you're a 13-year-old guy, it makes sense that you like Spider-Man, Batman, whatever. But to be in your 20s and in your 30s and to be, I don't know, like, for example, when I was in my 20s, I used to work with this guy who was like a literal version of Dwight from The Office. And, I mean, he was a nice guy, but he was super annoying, just super nerdy. And because we were close to each other in terms of our workspace, he was always trying to get me to go to these LARPing events. And, with the foam swords and shit. And I just was always thinking, like, dude, don't you understand how losery that is? And I don't even know why that is so losery. It just happens for some reason to attract like all of these ridiculous, weird people, loser people. And it's not even like, I mean, there's positive fantasy content. I mean, C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I mean, those are things that I enjoy. I like those things. But I also grew out of that dominating my life when I was no longer 13. And so it is absolutely essential for a young guy, for dudes, to grow out of that. And although I would say ultimately maybe the sports bro is only one level better than that kind of stuff, even that is still weird and immature and bizarre. Why are you living your life through a simulated combat scenario of a bunch of black dudes running in circles in sports hole? Like, if that dominates your life, you're only like this much better than the Marvel dude, the soy man. Because at least the sports bro or the jock kind of dude can get a date. The soy man, no hope. Not going anywhere. And you're not going to meet the cool nerd girl. Because even a cool nerd girl, guess what? She still likes a guy that has masculine sigma alpha traits. So a jock will even do better with a nerd girl than any kind of Marvel soy man. So you have to be honest, I think, in assessing yourself too in these scenarios and choosing your friends wisely. If your friends are a bunch of Marvel soy weirdos, then find new friends. If your friends are not engaged in some types of masculine activities, I've got multiple friends that do MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like this kind of stuff. Those are the guys that I respect and that I want to listen to and I want to learn from. People that have actually, for example, been in a fight. I think a lot of young guys, they've never even been in a fight, which is weird to me. I'm not telling you to try to get in a fight, but it seems like at some point you would be in a fight in a normal world because you need to learn to deal with this kind of stuff. And I'm not like some super fighter dude. I got beat up multiple times, but at least I was in a lot of fights. I didn't lose them all, but I was in fights. And it's like dudes don't even do this anymore. It's just weird. And that's, I think, the next one, which is point number 3, which is females. If you don't kind of get past certain hurdles, I think women can sense this. So, for example, in the case of the soy Marvel man, he doesn't get past something in the fantasy realm to transfer that time, attention, energy into the real world, to focus on some project that would give him status or success in the real world. So instead of all the time and energy that was spent knowing the ins and outs of all the Marvel nonsense, he could be knowing the ins and outs of investing and putting his money into stocks, crypto, whatever, gold, real estate. He could be doing that. But there's also, I think, a level of laziness involved in this too. So a lot of times people are slothful, they're lazy, they want to choose the easier route, the simplest route, or what they think is the easy, simple route, and it's just simply not. It's just delaying and putting off what you need to do for an immediate gratification that you've addicted yourself to through the dopamine receptors, through the video games, the gamification, and so forth. So guys need to learn self-discipline, which takes time to cultivate. And if you're trying to do that, say you're trying to quit drinking or you're trying to cut off video games, what I would recommend is don't think in extremes. You don't have to never play a video game. You don't have to never do whatever the thing is that you like. You have to really fast from these things. So for example, one thing I used to do is if I felt like in my 20s I was drinking too much, I would take a year off of drinking. And eventually I decided to just completely quit drinking. But in my 20s, there were times where I would think, all right, you know what, this year I drank a lot. I'm going to take a year off And after I did that a few times, a few years in my 20s, I realized that my life, my work productivity, my creativity, my health, all of these things were infinitely better the year that I didn't drink versus the year before when I did drink a lot. And so drinking is going to make you tired. It's going to make you less productive. You're going to fall asleep. Yeah, you're going to have fun yelling at the sports ball game and yelling at the bar or whatever. But eventually this gets old, and the dopamine rush that you got from the first time you drank goes away. Eventually it gets to the point where, and this is what like advanced alcoholics say, I don't think I experienced this level of it, but they have to drink to feel normal. So it's like it gets, right? It gets worse and worse and worse, and then you have to drink just to feel like you're normal or whatever. So you can easily just cut all that out right away. And when it comes to getting back to women not drinking and stuff, but if you're 19, 20, you might put the thing that you want to do as your focus. So don't get obsessed with and focused on chasing women and doing this and that, because you're going to want to be, and she's going to want you to be established and successful anyway, if you want to attract a high value woman, so to speak, a quality girl. And so if you're a dude who's playing video games and you don't have any future prospects and you don't have anything going for you, it's not really the time to think about this yet. You've got to start doing the work and put in the work to change you. Now, there's going to be an easy temptation that a lot of guys fall into right now all over the internet, which is to yap and whine and complain all day on the internet about women. As if all this complaining and whining on the internet is going to do anything except waste your time and make you bitter. So the first thing I realized when I was in high school and when I was around various different types of dudes, jocks, cool guys, art guys, funny guys, etc., I noticed that there were certain guys that the girls just gravitated towards. And they weren't always necessarily charismatic, funny guys. But of course, if you were a charismatic, funny, decent looking guy, you're fine. You're good. You're set. You've got your choice. But also jocks, because I think, we give jocks a hard time because of movies like Revenge of the Nerds or whatever. But we're living in the world of the Revenge of the Nerds, and the Gil Bateses and the Klauses. These are the nerds that have taken over, and like Isaac says, like the nerds are going to kill us all, right? So there's actually a place for jocks, especially at that time period when you need to be challenged, you need to have been in a fight, you need to be beaten up, this kind of stuff. So they play a key filtering role in society, I would say, as you get older. You realize that. But I noticed that the girls didn't like the guys who were, number one, nerdy. And, nerdy is something that might pay off down the road. Maybe you're nerdy in high school, but then you go get some, Silicon Valley job and you're a zillionaire and then you're good or something like that. But that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be able to navigate the world of women just because you made money. In fact, a lot of those guys get eaten up because they didn't have any experiences with girls when they were younger. And so when they made a lot of money later in life, they got gold dug, or they got cheated on, or they got a bad scenario, or they just didn't read the red flags and they married somebody terrible. Or they weren't, capable of managing these challenging situations because they had no experience with that. They might know everything about computers. They knew everything about engineering, but they had never navigated this domain of the opposite sex. So if you are new to that when you're later in life, it's going to be a challenge. But at the same time, when you're younger, you should focus, I think, on your plan for the future and what you want to do, rather than chasing and going after all these, people that you're probably not going to mesh with as you get older. So for example, if you're 18 and you're, with your high school sweetheart, but you plan to go off to college far away, that's going to present a significant challenge. And you might be able to weather that storm if you guys are, set to be together. I can say that from the people that I went to high school with, there are a couple people that ended up with their high school sweethearts. But I mean, that's few and far between. That's two or three out of hundreds or 1,000, 1,500 people. So you can't count on that, but you can set certain times for having that kind of fun, is what I'm trying to say. So if you want to go on dates, you want to meet people, go out with groups of friends or whatever. Do people still do this? I don't even know if this still exists, but if you do, I assume you do, especially if if you have like a church group or something like that, then you're going to meet people in those kinds of circles. And yeah, you might meet somebody good there. But again, if you're 18 to 25, a female is not your priority. I know that that's all that you can think about, but you have to learn the self-discipline to try to not let that overtake you and just be constantly chasing women, because as Solomon says, this will waste all of your time and energy and you're not going to get anywhere. And so you want to establish yourself, and then that will come around. As soon as you're a quality Sigma dude who has a decent living that you're making, you're not going to have a problem finding a decent girl. I could guarantee you that. But I see a lot of dudes, and I've met a lot of dudes over the last 20 years, 15 years, who have these really high expectations and these really high standards, and they don't have the gusto. They don't have the mojo. They don't have the riz to be trying to pull what they want. So if you're going to try, for example, you want to date a 9, you want to date a 10, this, that, you got to be bringing total 9, 10 Sigma A game, or else that's not what you're going to get. If you're trying to go for somebody who's more, around 5, 6, 7, but has great qualities, that's probably a better fit for you. Just speaking in the most basic level here. Next, I would say beyond... Oh, the other thing I want to say too is that, a basic principle that I see a lot of guys struggling with is, and I think this is becoming more and more known through pop culture and all of the male-female nonsense that everybody's fussing about on the internet all the time, is like, you want to be focused on what you do and your career and your work. You do not want, as Hollywood tells you to do, to be obsessed and focused on her. Her job is to be focused on the relationship and you. She's your helpmeet. Your job is to be focused on the world. That doesn't mean that you pay her no attention and you ignore her. I'm not saying that, obviously. I'm saying that the work that you do, that is your job as a man. The thing that you do, whatever that is. Your mission. And her mission will be to be with you on that mission. Your mission cannot be her. And when I was a high schooler, I was like every dude in like an 80s movie. At least early on. It took me a while to learn this lesson that Hollywood was telling me the wrong stuff, right? And what it took was getting, broken up with and dumped a few times by a couple girls that I really did like back at the time. I mean, I was immature, yeah, but I really liked them, and I think that for a time they liked me. But I realized looking back, I was kind of a clingy, mistake-ridden guy at that time. Like, I was being silly. And if I had handled those situations a lot better, not acting on the basis of emotion, but acting on the basis of principle, those situations would have played out better. Not that I mean I want to be with some high school ex-girlfriend. I don't care about that. No, you're going to, again, grow out of all that. And as you get older, you will actually be happy that you didn't end up with people that you thought you were supposed to be with when you were younger. It will work out in divine providence if you're faithful. But what I remember is that girls were not attracted to guys that were clingy. They were not attracted to guys that were signaling all the time that they were all about this or that girl. And I noticed I had friends that were very aloof. And those were some of the guys that most of the girls had a crush on. And in some cases, they weren't even the best looking, but they were fun, outgoing, charismatic, smart guys who were doing their own thing. And that was enough to make multiple girls attracted to some of the guys I'm thinking of. So I learned and I noticed that. I pay attention to that. Another thing, too, that's a really basic thing is like a lot of guys that I see, they dress like slobs. And I'm not saying that you have to put on a suit and tie everywhere you go or, dress to the nines. But I noticed all the time, I see guys all the time dressed down, which there's a time and a place for casual dress down. You're going to play football in the park with your dudes. Yeah, you're going to be dressed down. But you need to dress for the occasion. If you think that you're going out and you might meet people, don't wear your freaking pajamas. Don't dress like Idiocracy, right? With basketball shorts and just jerseys. Like, this is just so like low tier, right away. And women, we think of guys as visually oriented and women as emotionally oriented, but women are visually oriented too in many ways. Maybe not as extreme as guys are in terms of what they like, but women pay a lot of attention to aesthetics and to that kind of external, which their externals are not the most important, but they do matter. And so if you look like a damn slob, if you look like you're unkempt, and again, think about the sphere of the Funko Pop, soy, video game, comic book people. Like when you're around these people, if you walk into a bookstore and you walk over to the Funko Pop aisle, these people smell like ass. They're awful, right? They smell like they are, which is just pure butt. And that's not attractive. And I realized it's like people didn't notice this in high school. Like, did you not realize that girls like it when guys dress nice? If you don't dress nice, you're probably not going to get a girl or attract a female. It's like, it's not rocket science. It's kind of basic stuff. Like, just dress nice. In fact, in my life, I can remember times where jobs that I had where I wore a suit and a tie, I noticed a lot more female flirting interests and interactions than places or times where I worked where I was dressed, down or dressed slobby or whatever. Super, super casual. So, those are some of the basic principles that could easily kind of help dudes that I see dudes not even being aware of these kind of basics. And then I've had guys ask me too, like, well, there's just nowhere, there's no girls, there's no ways to meet girls. Like, I don't go to bars, and I'm not going to go to the beach, and I'm not going to go to the gym, and I'm not going to, so it's like they're not going to go anywhere. I'm going to try to meet a girl on the internet. You're way better off if you can meet people in person and demonstrate your qualities in person. And one example I would say is like, if you have time off and you would like to meet a girl, why don't you go and take some books and sit and read in the coffee shop and wait until a girl comes in and strike up a conversation? Did that ever occur to you? When I was single, I met a lot of girls that way. One of whom I dated for 4 years. So that's just an example of, now there are ways that you can find and meet people. And maybe you need to place yourself in those situations rather than just sitting around and like, oh, I don't know, like as if this is like some chick is going to come knocking on your door. Like, I'm looking for a guy who plays video games and like wants to go hang out or whatever. That's not going to happen. I can guarantee you that. Okay. No babe is coming to your door to Netflix and chill with you. Next, I would say money. As I said, this is point number 5. I'm sorry. 4 was, 3 was women. Number 4 is reading books. Instead of the comic books and the video games, what was normal 50, 60, 80 years ago was for houses to actually have libraries, what you see here. And this other wall is also exactly the same as this wall. And guess what? There's another room that is exactly the same as this room with wall-to-wall books on both sides. And I say that because over the years, when people would see, and I've had a library since I was, I don't know, in my 20s, people would come in and they would be, whoa, why do you have all these books? And people thought it was weird. And I'm like, why do you think that it's weird? Well, do you read all these? But you read all these books? That's the number one dumb comment that I get from everybody who sees this library when they come over. That's how I know I'm talking to an idiot. You read all them books? Having a library is not for the purpose of reading every book and sitting down. For example, there's reference books. Nobody reads an entire reference book, but you have them on hand. Now, today's soy men, bug soldiers, they believe that books are antiquated and that they have AI and chat GPT now, and they're all experts and scientists and philosophers and PhDs because of Grok and chat GPT. But guess what? Those things are constantly, consistently wrong. They're misleading. They're programmed by programmers with biases in many cases. So if you actually think that you're going to fool people and front as if you actually know subject matters without having actually read the works and the books, it's not going to work. You're going to make a fool out of yourself. And it's not worth it to try to be some grifter playing this game. So you should actually cultivate a habit of really reading real books, physical books. And if you're interested in, well, what should I read? I made a video some years back on this very point right here. You can see 15 books you should read before you pass away. So you need to start disciplining yourself. And this is hard. I understand. Like I have a hard time disciplining myself, even though I work all day long and have written several books and done several projects and so forth. Like, it's still hard for me to actually force myself to read a lot because it is a challenge, but it's the type of thing that is a challenge that will be far more rewarding for you than playing Black Ops all night or whatever other games people play all night, Fortnite, right? Instead of all of that, you're cultivating time where you are silent and taking in information, chewing it over, reflecting on it, and actually progressing in your understanding and your knowledge versus a pseudo knowledge and a pseudo progression in knowledge through summarized bullet points of ChatGPT. You just can't replace the actual work of reading the text. And the younger that people are, the more they're duped into this delusion of thinking that they can. And I even saw yesterday and some idiots on Twitter actually thinking that they have like scientific qualifications now because they have Grok and ChatGPT. It's like insanity. But that isn't really going to benefit you in life, going by these sort of weird shortcuts. So if you haven't cultivated the habit of reading on a regular basis, it's time to start. And start small. Start with something, if you're not used to reading, start with something simple like C.S. Lewis's Narnia books. Those are very easy to read. They're written for kids. And I know that might be a little embarrassing, but if you're not used to reading and you want to get started, you're going to need to start with something that's not heavy that you can follow along with. That's a story. And those books were written to get kids reading, you see. So after you read that, you move up to something a little more mature, a little more advanced, maybe some of the classics of Western literature, something like 1984, maybe something like Brave New World, right? And then you kind of move on up to other more advanced, more difficult texts, perhaps Lord of the Rings. C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy is actually fairly sophisticated and very, very much written for an adult audience. And so if you're going to try to go in that domain, it's going to require you having some knowledge of classical literature. And then you want to kind of work your way up to those kinds of things if you're interested in being educated. Today's people, like the youth, the Gen Z, many of them are not really interested in being educated. And that's why they think that the ChatGPT shortcut is a shortcut to education, and it's not. If you've not read the classics, if you've not been immersed in those things and spent time in those things and grasped and gained the wisdom of the ancients, you're not educated. You might know a lot about one thing, and if you want to be a niche focused person, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But to be an educated person means that you're going to be familiar with Plato, Aristotle, pre-Socratics, etc. Augustine, church fathers, medieval writers, Aquinas. You're going to know these texts. You're going to be familiar with those texts, the philosophy texts, the great books. And you're also going to be familiar with some of these more recent important works of literature. Like I said, 1984, Brave New World, Island of Dr. Moreau. These are very important books for cultural and historical reasons. And you can start with the fiction if you're not used to reading. Usually people find it easy to begin with that, and then you can work your way up to more advanced, more serious adult. I don't mean adult like nudie books, but adult in the sense of mature reading material, like the other books that we're talking about. But it's sad too that the domain of academia is now dominated by women. This used to be a completely masculine profession, to be a professor or a teacher. That has actually flipped, and I think it's something like 50 to 60, almost 60% now of PhDs in academia are women. And that is a weird, inverted social experiment that is not going to work out well. Because this ultimately means the gutting of the classical education, the gutting of the great books, the canon of the West, etc., and replacing it with the DEI, the woke, all that kind of stuff. Next is, after cultivating that, is money. You want to begin to think about and learn about putting your money somewhere, because the dollar is fiat, the dollar is a waste, the dollar is dying, the dollar cannot be fixed, the debt cannot be paid unless there's some miraculous move that Trump and people are going to do in the next 4 years. Maybe they will, nationalizing Federal Reserve or pegging it to a Bitcoin standard or something like this. Without that miraculous thing happening, the dollar will continue to decline in its purchasing power, in its value through inflation, because it's not pegged to anything. It's pure fiat. And it has been for a long time, and that's why its value decreases. That's why inflation constantly destroys the purchasing power. And even if you're working 40, 60, 80 hours a week to try to catch up and to try to keep up, the devaluation of the dollar never allows you to get ahead. If you can never get ahead, then it's a rigged system. It's a rigged game. That was the value of me doing all this reading throughout my 20s, is that I learned that the system, among many things, I learned that the system that we live in is a rigged system, and it's a scam. And it's a scam that makes it very difficult for average Joe, or for working class, or for those, good, solid, middle America farmer people to get anywhere. And it's that way by design. Now, you can be angry and upset and resentful, or you can face up to that and begin to make the changes that you're able to do in your life to cope and to deal with that. Those are the facts. That's the reality. That's how we got to fight it and face up to it. We're not going to, as individuals, engage in some massive global transformation on an individual level. So, and this is like a constant, mistake that the left makes. I'm going to save the world and fix the world, when most leftist lives themselves are complete disasters. But that's actually a way to escape responsibility and to act like and to pretend that I'm going to save the world, even though I can't manage my own life. It's like when I hear the people telling me all the economic advice that they're always so eager to give on the internet and in the comments and in replying to my videos, or when I talk about Bitcoin. I guarantee you most of the people barking advice and telling me what to do with my money haven't actually made money. Do they run a business? Are they objectively in some way successful with the ventures that they've risked? Probably not. I mean, maybe I just happen to get zillionaire crypto experts in all of my chat, but I don't think that's true, because usually when I start talking about money and finances, half of the audience just jets. They're out. But this is odd, because doesn't everybody, probably 95% of us, aren't we concerned with finances and bills? It's odd that so many people would duck out when I talk about that, given that probably all of us are concerned in some degree with paying the bills. I think most people in America now do live check to check. There's these studies that talk about, high percentages of people that don't have more than $500, a few $100s on hand. Very few people have more than a couple $1,000s in the bank. And that is not how you want to be living. And when I was in my 20s and even into my early 30s, that's how I was living. I lived check to check. I lived on slave wages. I had a small rental house. I could barely pay the bills for that. Even when I was working an okay job when I left grad school. And for a while, for example, I was working at AT&T, at a local AT&T selling cell phones. And because I had done college, they wanted me to be a manager. And I didn't want to work the manager hours, because the manager hours were 60 plus, basically all of your time and energy. And it didn't even pay that great. So I said, well, can I just stay on as just doing sales? And, I'm happy to just kind of make the money that I make. And they said, no, you either have to be a 60 plus hour a week manager, or we have to let you go. So I chose to leave. And that was one of the best decisions I ever made, because you might think, well, you passed up a manager. But I didn't go to college and do all this and try to go to grad school because I wanted to manage a damn AT&T outlet. That's not what I'm here for. So I think that you have to have some degree of drive and assessment of your actual quality, skills, and abilities, and whether you can actually do something with those things. And I actually had to reach kind of the end of my rope before I thought, you know what, I might as well try writing books and doing my own media. I don't know. I have no idea if it'll be successful, but since I've been trying all these ridiculous dead-end jobs, why not at least try this and see what happens? And I did not expect it to go as well as it has. So it's been a tremendous blessing, and I thank God for that, but it's not what I expected. But what I'm saying is that you will probably need to experiment, fail at some things, try some things, to begin to figure out what it is that you're going to do that is your moneymaker, that is your career. And I think the better chance that you have at starting your own business, that's way better. If you're a driven, self-motivated person, you will be much better off starting your own business than if you work for some fat, bitchy manager. You don't want to be in that position. I was in that for many, many years. And I finally just decided, all right, I'm ready to do whatever it takes to not be in that position. So I began to sell my body. No, I'm just joking. Next, after money and getting your money right and beginning to... the last thing I want to say about money was, if you're coming from, disadvantaged economic, shall we say, retorted economic settings, or from lower middle class or middle class settings, I came from that as well. You probably didn't learn anything about investing. And so now you have everything at your fingertips to learn anything that you want. And I didn't know anything about investing in crypto in 2016. And by 2017, I had invested a sizable chunk of the, not a lot, but I don't know, $10,000, $15,000 that I had into crypto. And that's risky. That was a big venture. I didn't know what was going to happen with that back in 2017, but it turned out good. And I learned a lot. I made mistakes. I made some bad trades and so forth. And that's going to happen. And I'm not telling you to be a trader. In fact, I don't do much trading at all, really. But I needed to learn that I don't need to be spending all this time trading because it's a waste of time and it's just gambling. For me, that was my decision. And that ended up working out better for me in terms of doing that. So what I'm saying is that was a risky behavior, a risk venture that I was willing to engage in. And a lot of the Gen Z people are absolutely risk averse. And this is actually the real risk. You have to take risks in life. I am not talking about foolhardy behavior, but courage, which is the virtue which is in between, right, the vices of cowardice and foolhardiness. Courage is the golden mean, if you read Aristotle. So being courageous includes some risk-taking behaviors. For example, you're in the coffee shop, you're over there reading your book, your Bible, whatever. You see a cute girl come in. You haven't asked the girl out. You're scared to do it. You're nervous. Oh, what if she rejects me? What if... You got to do it. And you need to go through being rejected. You've made some money. You've begun to look at Bitcoin. You've got, a few $1,000s stored up. But you're nervous about putting your money into Bitcoin. Oh, I've never sent my money on Coinbase. Is Coinbase going to take it? Oh, is my money going to get deleted? Like all of these fears that you're going to have, you have to just do it. You have to have some risk-taking behaviors. But risk-taking behaviors that I'm classifying under courageous activities, not under foolhardiness. What's foolhardiness? Like, I'll take all my money and I'll go to the roulette wheel and I'll put everything on red. That's foolhardiness. That's stupid. But learning to invest and learning to do those things, perhaps you engage in real estate ventures. Maybe that's what you're interested in. That's a risk that you're engaged. Like, you might purchase a property that ends up being a lemon, that ends up burning down. I had a friend one time that engaged in a big risk-taking venture where he took out a loan and he wanted to flip a house. And he put a whole lot of time and energy and money and effort into this house. And then there was the 2008, 9, whatever, the housing crash. And he had a really hard time selling the house after putting a lot of money and time and effort into it. And he did eventually sell it, but I think he broke even or maybe made a few $1,000s. So he basically spent 8 months, a year of intensive hard work that he was doing himself, pretty much alone, I think, and made $1,000 out of that, $2,000. Now, yes, he learned a lot from that hard lesson, but that risky behavior, even though it was in a sense kind of a failure, it didn't make the big money he thought he was going to make. It's still a good thing that he took that risk. And I think that's one of the things that separates, for example, jocks from the nerds, is nerds are kind of cowardly. Yes, a jock might be foolhardy. He might be kind of dumb. But a jock has at least the courage and the fortitude, the bravery to engage in some of the activities and things that the nerds are too scared to do because of being dominated by a kind of an inner cowardice and an inner fear of what? Of being rejected, made fun of. Well, guess what? You're going to get rejected in life. You're going to get made fun of. Who cares? It's not a big deal. You have to overcome those things. I mean, just even talking in front of a crowd is apparently like a massive amount of the population's greatest fear. To talk in front of a crowd. I remember the first time I ever talked in front of a crowd, maybe when I was a kid in elementary school, and I remember being afraid, but I easily overcame that fear. Why? I just did it. You just do it. I remember sweating and being nervous on stage in theater when we were in high school. But we just did it. And you learn to control your emotions and not let your emotions overtake you in those situations. So facing up to all these fears is a thing that the nerds never do. And the jocks are pretty good at, actually. So try to learn from the archetypes, so to speak. We've been talking about Carl Jung and archetypes. If you're a nerd and you're in the nerd archetype, try to begin to absorb into you some of the archetype of the foolhardy jock, or even the courageous jock, I should say. Think it, blab it, name it, claim it, blab it, grab it, hair grow. I'm just kidding. That's Kenneth Copeland. Don't be like Kenneth Copeland. Next after money is, actually, I think we kind of covered this. Let me see my list here. Put down the phone. This is a difficult one nowadays. For guys especially. When I see a lot of dudes out, when I see people in restaurants, when I see people doing things, I see the dudes as much on their phone as the ladies. And this is a massive time and energy waster. And a lot of people are pretty good. I've got friends that are really good at it. Like, they're really good at turning on the snooze or the whatever, all the different notifications are turned off stuff. If you can get to where you're disciplined enough to not be on the internet from certain times, like, okay, I'm off the internet at 5 o'clock. Phones are off at 8 o'clock, whatever. That's a good thing. It is difficult, especially given, for example, the nature of what work we do, and because I'm working on the internet usually until late at night, that is very difficult to do. But if you can, and the less you can be on the internet, the better. I would say that in the last year or two, Jamie and I have had a pretty good tendency to spend less and less time on the internet. And we try to cultivate doing more and more things together. So, for example, when the weather is not awful, which is most of the time it's good in Florida, it's terrible in Tennessee, but most of the time in Florida the weather's good, we usually do something outside every day, at least for multiple hours. We like walks, we do the gym multiple times a week. When we do a walk route, however, though, we are trying to get direct sunlight for multiple hours, right? And the more the sunlight, the better. We don't believe this boomer nonsense of putting damn petroleum on your skin to block the sun. What the hell is that all about? It's crazy. So none of that. In fact, when I quit using sunscreen years ago, my skin, I think, has done better, and I don't really get sunburns as much as I used to. So who knows what the heck all that petroleum's even doing, but getting outside and getting regular sun, and absolutely you have to be involved in some kind of exercise activity. If you don't want to be at the gym 3 times a week, then you need to be playing basketball with some dudes. Go play pickup games. Something. I mean, there's a lot of like Adirondack bros or whatever. Like, if you want to be one of them, okay, whatever. Go do the whitewater rafting and be one of them bros or whatever. But, yeah. And I would say too, when one of my best friends had passed the other day, one of the things that we used to love was playing basketball. And, I wasn't living as close to him as I used to, even though we did keep up in contact pretty constantly every couple days. The one thing that I really miss with him that was an amazing activity was we played basketball for about 20 years, like pretty regularly. Maybe 15. The last 5 years, not so regularly. But for 15 years, we played basketball largely every summer, most summers. And I'll never be able to play basketball with him again. And so, like, just something as simple as that is like, you're going to wish that you had engaged in those kinds of activities more, right, as you get older. That's how I have these amazing calves that I have. People are like, how do you have awesome calves? I kind of wish everything else was as awesome as my calves. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it's probably the best calves. He's got the best, most wonderful calves. It's from basketball. It's from 20 years of playing basketball, I think. Anyway, but I wish that I had put in more time doing basketball bro activities with my buddy who passed away. And again, obviously that's just a health basic, right? If you're active at that level all the time, even into your middle ages. So putting down the phone and exchanging the phone for productive activities. So much of the scrolling is doing nothing for you. I know people call it brain rot, but like, it's not just brain rot. It's also, what about your creativity in the world? What about your message in the world? What about your time that you could be spending learning something actually valuable instead of watching a bunch of people be idiots? Like, most of the internet is bots and idiots and retort, right? It's worthless. It's a waste of time. I mean, at least in, say, 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, I can think back to those times. And when I was on the internet, most of my time was reading articles, because that was the period when blogging was getting, really popping off. All the big media outlets and the alternative media outlets, like you could just read articles, and amazing, really good articles, just hours and hours and hours reading articles about everything and anything. And, the internet has changed bigly since 2016, which has given rise to some people theorizing dead internet theory, that the internet is largely dead. It's a lot of bots, and that they did that on purpose, perhaps, to stop where it was going. Obviously the last couple of years we have seen positive changes, resurgence of things moving in the direction of sanity, free speech, etc. It's not perfect, but we're seeing the pendulum at least moving back in a somewhat sane direction out of where we have been from, 2016 to 2022 was just crazy. I mean, full on just pure dystopia on so many levels, Twitter files, all of that. It's basically Mockingbird 2.0. But now that's changed. But one thing that's not so great about the internet is that it's not the kind of amazing information machine that it was back in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11. And so I don't think AI is coming alive and taking over. I think that's all idiotic and nonsensical. But what it's going to do, and somebody commented today about this. I thought this was a really good comment. I'll read it. It's brief, but it's actually very appropriate to this point, which is that AI rollout is probably similar to the way that LSD was rolled out, in terms of the government knowing about it, sitting on it, and exploring its potential military and theft enabling capacities as a kind of a psyop to release on society. I'm not sure why I put theft, but then they realized that it makes people, in terms of AI, dumber with extended use, and they immediately dumped it on the population. So, like with LSD, so with AI, this is making people dumber over time, thinking that they're getting smarter, and they're actually getting dumber. And thus it was probably released on purpose to make people dumber. And that's apparently going to be the replacement for what used to be going to the websites and reading all of the news and then getting these different vantage points and these different opinions, and maybe coming to some approximation of the truth from reading all sides, versus an autocratic, so-called objective AI just telling you what the truth is. Anyway, all of that cannot replace actual information and study on your own time through books, and not replacing it with screens. So put down the phone. Next is, don't worry about, in my opinion, if you are there are exceptions to this, like you're going to go into engineering, somebody's paying for your college at some, nice private school or something like that. Those are exceptions, but for the most part, don't even worry about advanced academia. It's completely captured. It's completely taken over by the woke. Trump needs to shut down not just the Department of Education, but the state universities. They're the havens of the brainwashing. That's a huge puzzle piece for the destruction of Western civilization in the last 60, 70 years. Like Frankfurt School, like that kind of ideology as an example, dominating academia. It's dominated by feminists, Marxists, socialists. It is not for you, especially the arts. The arts are the absolute worst for that. So, and I say this because guys all the time, do you think I should go to college? No, probably not. In college, university, it had its place. It was good in some ways, and sometimes in some places, and maybe some places still. But that's the legacy system that's going away. People even now get degrees in software engineering, and they can't get hired. I saw some guy's YouTube video the other day, and it was like, I spent $200,000 on or 6,000 hours on my software training degree, and I cannot get a job, and I work at Geek Squad or whatever. So don't even worry about that. Think about what talents, skills, and abilities you have to create and to start your own job. And the internet makes that very easy nowadays. So putting down the phone, not worrying about academia. I already mentioned number 8 was gym and exercise. We covered that. Number 9 was looking good. We covered that. I kind of did this out of order, but that's okay. And number 10, of course, is to begin to read the Bible and to get involved in and look for an Orthodox church. Just ask the priest some basic questions to know if it's a good church. Like, are you pro Skittles? Do you support this or that? Like that kind of stuff. And that will help you know whether you're at a decent place or a crazy place. And if you've never read the Bible and you want to start reading the Bible, if you're a guy, I would actually say, especially if you're a young guy, start with the wisdom texts. In fact, I'm not going to tell you necessarily to begin reading the Gospels. If you're going to go to the Orthodox Church and get catechized and all that, you'll have plenty of time for all that. But the Proverbs, which are great for young guys, Proverbs were actually a catechesis, a moral catechesis for people at that time. So it's actually written for young guys. So if you're looking for young guy wisdom, read the book of wisdom. So the Orthodox Study Bible, for example, has a chapter on, or excuse me, they have the deuterocanonical texts, several of which are really good wisdom texts. Wisdom for life. That's what we're talking about today. Wisdom for life. Not just knowledge, but wisdom, which is the correct application of the knowledge. You can be a spur and know all the facts and have absolutely no wisdom. Wisdom is knowing how and when to apply the knowledge in the right way. And that comes with time. But I know that over the years, one of the things that has really helped me and guided me in that regard, in terms of wisdom, was wisdom. Reading the book of wisdom. Reading Proverbs over and over and over. I've read Proverbs over and over and over all throughout my life. I highly recommend doing that. Reading Sirach. I've read Sirach multiple times. I recommend you doing that. Reading Ecclesiastes. So familiarizing yourself with those texts, especially if you're a guy, will be very helpful. And even to the point of like what kinds of girls to avoid. Solomon has tons of wisdom on that throughout Proverbs. And in Proverbs 31, he gives you the ideas of what woman to look for, the Proverbs 31 woman. And there's nothing wrong with a woman having a business and engaging in those kinds of activities. So this sort of weird, crazy guys on the internet try to act like they're acting like they're Salafi Muslims or something. Well, Proverbs 31 lauds and praises the woman who can engage in her own activities of business and, going out to the marketplace and so forth. So it's really idiotic especially for Zoomers and people that are really, have no life experience to be on Twitter barking at, telling women they shouldn't have a job, or it's just idiotic, nonsensical stuff. And especially if you're a young guy, don't do that. Do not waste your time arguing and whining and complaining and being a victim on Twitter. That is the most pathetic behavior, to be doing that on the internet. All of that time and energy that you're putting into that. Well, I'm just trolling. I'm just trolling on the internet, bro. I'm just shit posting. You're wasting your own time. And you won't get that time back when you're older. You will wish that you had not wasted that time. I'll give you one last example. One of the things I realized many years ago, back in, say, 2007, 8, 9, I would drink a lot and I would argue a lot on Facebook. And we would have long, extensive arguments about all kinds of stuff. Geopolitics, history, theology debates, atheism debates, all that. Just going on and on and on. For hours and hours and hours. Sometimes these threads would go on Facebook comments for days. I remember one time having a debate with a Roman Catholic that went on for like 4 days, like 500 comments. And I'm talking long debate comments. And then one day I realized this is going to scroll away in this infinite feed and will be forgotten. And no one will know or care. And did you notice that the Instagram feed, Twitter feed, all the feeds feed you an infinite scroll, and it's never static or situated. And I remember reading an analysis of that a long time ago that was done by design. And I understand it's unfortunate. I wish it was a different way, but it's how it is. The infinite feed is intended to infinitely extract your attention and energy because it's never ending. You never get to the end. There's no beginning, middle, and end. It puts you in an infinity scroll by design to infinitely keep your attraction and attention, you see, to attract your attention, to extract it. That's how insidious the super tech overlord oligarchy is, right? So you have to combat that and realize that if I'm doing this and just machine gunning out this infinite nonsense and arguing with idiots all day, and I've been guilty of this. How much time have I wasted over the years arguing with idiots on the internet? At least if it's a live stream or a debate, it's recorded. People can refer back to it. It becomes some kind of footnote, so to speak, on the discussion, on the debate, on the topic. But the infinite feed is just tweeting into oblivion. You're just talking to no one for all eternity. Because do you think in 10 years anyone's going to remember your tweet? In 20 years, is anyone going to remember that Facebook scroll, that infinite 500 comment debate, except for maybe me and whoever the other person? The other people probably don't remember it. So it has no value. But if I have a book, it's a physical object that cannot be deleted. It could be burned up, I know. And I'm not opposed to having the electronic versions of the books or whatever to store them, to make sure that they can even be put on the blockchain to make sure they never go away. But you need the physicality. You need physical books and copies. That's incarnated. That's embodied. It's human. We're not bots. We don't live in the ether. We're not minds floating around. We are embodied beings, hence the incarnation. So, having physical Bibles, having a physical church you go to, physical sacraments, a physical girlfriend, wife, right? Not a waifu pillow, okay? Not a sex bot. That's reality. That's what it is to be a man in part. And these are my ideas and helpful suggestions for young dudes. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did enjoy this, hit like, hit share. Be sure and head on over to choq.com. That is the show sponsor, choq.com. The best in supplementation right here. And if you would like to utilize these products for a nice supplement to your exercise regimen and to your healthy carnivore diet or ketogenic diet, as I recommend, then definitely head on over to choq.com. Use the promo code JAY44LIFE, J44Life, to get 44% off all those great products. And you can also go to jaysanalysis.com, and in the shop, you can get my books, signed copies, as well as Jamie's, and tell me below in the comments other wisdom and advice that you have for young dudes.